I just got done watching Avatar: The Way of Water. This will be my non-spoiler movie review, and truly enough, as you can see from the title and the thumbnail, let's just break it out. This is a masterpiece. This is probably my favorite film of the year. I'm going to go back and rewatch it again, but just coming out of it and really sitting on this movie, this is the movie that I wanted. And I think what James Cameron has crafted here and shown is that you can't count him out. This guy has not just made one of the best sequels of all time with Aliens, or even Terminator 2, which Terminator 2 is one of my favorite movies of all time. He has crafted, yet again, one of the best sequels of all time with Avatar 2, The Way of Water. And as you can see behind me, I'm a huge fan of the original Avatar. That film I have some mighty nostalgia for, and in 2009, while I had grown up loving movies, that was like the movie that showed me like what a true blockbuster in theaters can be. And ever since then, I have just loved film to such a higher degree. And there are certain movies in my path of doing this on YouTube, and Avatar is a part of that. And I've actually cherished it so much that I haven't gone back and rewatched it at home, maybe ever. I rewatched it earlier this year, and then went back and saw the re-release, and I just completely and utterly fall in love with Pandora each time. And going to see The Way of Water in theaters is truly the reason to go back to the theaters. Like, you had Top Gun Maverick earlier this year, and that was a true experience in the movie theater. But this is, bar none, the best theatrical experience I've ever felt in my entire life. I'm not talking about when people are screaming and cheering, but absolutely being taken back and taken to a brand new, well, I guess not brand new world, but taken back to Pandora and completely and utterly falling all over in love with it. It is truly everything I wanted the sequel to be, and I am very high on this movie, so I'm very excited to talk about it. Make sure to leave your thoughts down below, as hit that like and subscribe button, because we don't just have this video coming out, but we also have an Avatar versus Avatar 2, The Way of the Water video, a James Cameron ranking, and tons of top 10 lists for the end of the year, because this is one of the final films that I'm seeing for this year, and I'm so excited to be here. So let's dive into this review, and starting with the pros, because like I mentioned, this is a masterpiece. I will talk about some nitpicks that I do wish we got a little bit more of, but no film is perfect. But for me, bar none, it is a near perfect film. And honestly, say near perfect, it is perfect. I just wish we got a little bit more, and I can't wait to see what Cameron has next for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I know he's even talked about those, but this makes me even more excited for the third film than I ever thought I would be. I really do think the first Avatar film kind of ends in a perfect manner. And I was worried going back to this, is Cameron gonna be able to craft more than just a visual spectacle? And getting the obvious out of the way, the visual effects are incredible. This is the best looking movie I've ever seen. In fact, there was not one frame in here where I was like, that's fake. Saying that because I actually got to see this in 3D and high frame rate, which I'm not a fan of high frame rate movies. I was not a fan of the re-release of how they actually did the high frame rate in there. I actually thought it was quite distracting, and I was very nervous going into this movie. But this movie uses it in a way better manner, and I think Cameron has almost cracked the code on high frame rate. In fact, the only thing I will say about that is I just wish the entire film was high frame rate. He chooses certain scenes, and I would say about 80% of the movie is high frame rate, and it looks fantastic. There's some jarring moments where it flips back, and I'm like, why'd you flip back? Like, you should have left it. But even saying that, I was truly impressed with it, and it actually did invigorate and make the 3D even more immersive than you could truly even believe. The 3D in here is better than the original. And I just saw the original again in 3D, and it's better in every way. I completely forgot that I was sitting in a theater, and I know people will say that when watching a movie, but I genuinely mean that. This felt like I was going on a Disney ride, but not one of those cheap 3D rides that they have. And I've been on the Flight of Pandora ride at Disney World. This is better than it. The visual effects, the detail in every single scene. Again, I'm stating the obvious from what you could see in the trailer, and you know Cameron to do, but it is like almost indescribable what Cameron was able to do in this movie when it comes down to visual effects and touches, and specifically water. Water is a big main part of this. We see Jake Sully and his family leave the forest because this movie is about Jake Sully, who lives again with his newfound family. This takes place years after the first one, and a familiar threat returns to finish what was previously started, which makes Jake, Neytiri, and really much the rest of his family take off into a new journey to maybe form new alliances and discover new parts of Pandora. And we go to these islands which really much focus on the water. And you remember all the first flight and certain things like that, and just seeing certain spectacles in the forest, you get a lot of those with the water. And as someone who grew up being fascinated with the ocean, and still is pretty fascinated with the ocean, and maybe even at one point in my life wanting to be an oceanographer, this is one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen, specifically in the way that it handles water. Everything just looks real. You completely forget that, like, Neytiri and Sully are completely visual effects. Like, you believe that they actually flew to a different planet. Like, again, indescribable and stunning is, like, the easiest way to say that, and I keep talking about the most obvious thing, but the new stunning and awe of what James Cameron's able to do with Under the Water is beautiful, and I'm speechless by what he was able to do. It just is just as awe and in spectacle as what he did with the first one. And I think how he's able to craft and build on the mythology of the first one is beautiful. And also seeing the themes and kind of the parallels to Jake Sully discovering the forest of Pandora, we get to see through his children this time as they're meeting new characters and meeting some of the children in this tribe and meeting just how this tribe works, because this tribe has like different things. They can swim a little bit faster, they can stay underwater a little bit longer, their hands are a little bit different, they have fins. Like, there's a lot of cool unique things that they do for this new tribe that I was really entertained with, and I thought was some of the coolest aspects. And just in general, seeing how they work compared to how Jake and everyone else worked in the forest is again awe-inspiring. And seeing how Cameron was able to again craft and build on that spectacle is amazing. But spectacle can be spectacle, but it also comes down to writing. And I think this is where Cameron really shines in this script. Now, do I think this is one of the best scripts ever made? No. I think Cameron really much makes a movie that feels like it would have been made in, say, the Terminator days. But that's kind of a compliment, because we don't get blockbusters like this nowadays. There are some cheesy moments, and even though I do love the parallels, that is actually my favorite thing about this movie, is the themes and nature of family, death, and surviving. All of these elements are things that I feel really much happen within a family, and seeing Jake Sully have to take down this newfound family and really build upon it is a lot for him and Neytiri. But James Cameron doesn't just focus on them. And this is the one thing I was going into this movie worried about, was focusing on the children, because the trailers heavily emphasized on that. And even if you went to the re-release, both scenes that I saw were about the children. I loved his kids. I loved each and every one. Did all of them get the best development in the world? No. His introductions to most of them, introductions to newfound ideas that will really much touch onto the world of Avatar in the future films, I am completely and utterly sucked in. I found this movie to actually be more emotional than the first one due to the found family love that you feel for them, and you actually feel like you are a part of this family. It is something truly stunning, and again, Cameron does it in a magnificent way that blew me away. I got so intertwined with each and every one of the people in here, and again, that goes with the performances. Zoe Saldana's Neytiri is phenomenal. She has one amazing moment towards the third act that is absolutely incredible. Sam Worthington as Jake Sully is great. Kate Winslet and Cliff Curtis, let me just talk about them real fast. I wanted a little bit more of them. They're great in this movie, but again, it's more of an introduction to those characters since they focus more on their kids. Sigourney Weaver is great as Kira, which is one of Jake Sully and Neytiri's kids. Stephen Lang as Miles, being back, I love it. Again, you're going to find out how they bring back certain characters and the capacity of how they're bring back. I wish there was a little bit more development on that, but there's just enough for me to go, I'm good with it. It's just like certain things that Cameron introduces in, like, say, Terminator and Terminator 2 that you just kind of have to go with. Also, speaking of the likes of Bailey Bass, Jamie Flatters, Britton Dalton, who was a big standout, Jake Champion, Chloe Coleman, and the list goes on from there. Every person you meet in here, there's this sweet sincerity to them that I could not get enough of. And again, performances, spectacle, story, themes, everything really comes together in this movie and more. And the other thing I was actually quite impressed with, and looking at the marketing, it felt like, okay, we're doing the same story. The Sky People are coming back for revenge. And in a way, yeah, this is a revenge story from one perspective and another perspective. And I've always loved touching on stories with the cycle of violence because violence always continues. No matter what, you feed into violence, you get more violence. You feed into that violence, you get more violence. It's something that we've seen directly in a lot of different movies and TVs and video games lately, but I think this is one of the more stronger avenues for it in the way that it touches on it. But at the same time, I was expecting a big out war like we got in the first movie, and there is a lot of action in here, specifically in the back half and some of the first half. But the thing with it is, it actually is more smaller scale than everything. And don't get me wrong, I actually think the action in here is a little bit more fluid, more stronger in this one, since it is more tighter and compressed. And I think Cameron did a great job of building out that war in the first one, but I like how this one was a little bit more personal, and I love how smaller scale it was when it came down to a lot of the war and the fighting, and specifically how it really is just this smaller scaled story. It built a lot more anticipation as well as vigorousness that keeps it on an intense ride throughout the entire way. And I actually think that the third act of this movie might be James Cameron's best third act yet. And I say that as Terminator 2 being one of my favorite films of all time. And I just got done rewatching that movie, and this movie, truly enough, blew me away. And I guess that's where I also talk about the score, the cinematography, and truly enough, everything that I could want. Like, what I wanted from this sequel was a more emotional story that was going to build out the world of Pandora as well as Jake Sully's family, and I got exactly that with some of the best spectacle and visual effects that I've ever seen in my entire life. If not the best visual effects that I've ever seen. This is top tier Cameron, and you can never bet out on Cameron. I knew this movie was going to be great, and it exceeded all those expectations. I do want to talk about some nitpicks, though, that I think some people might have with this movie. Now, if you're not a fan of the original Avatar movie, I do not think this movie is going to completely sway you whatsoever. You have to have seen that movie to really feel a lot of the background context with Jake Sully and Neytiri. You get kind of a recap, but overall, if you haven't seen that movie or you're not a fan of that one, I don't see this movie being your cup of tea. I'm a big fan of that first one, so this one exceeded a lot of lengths for me. As well as there is a lot of characters in here. Now, for me, I found this to be kind of a great middle chapter. I love those kind of chapters that kind of build up to stories, and sometimes that's not for everyone. But this one actually made me more excited for what is possible to come in Avatar, as well as being a better sequel to the original movie by giving better character development. Now, again, there's a lot of characters. I think this movie's 3 hour and 15-minute runtime makes sense because of how many characters and how much exploration you have to dive into here. And I like the parallels. Some people might find it a little bit cheesy, but for me, I dug it. And I do like the introduction to every one of these characters, even if I did want a little bit more. That's just to say, we're getting more of these movies, so it's kind of just more of a small little nitpick, but again, nothing that really deterred anything that I had problems with this film. That's why I think Avatar: The Way of the Water is not just one of the best sequels ever created, it's a goddamn masterpiece. It's breathtaking, visually stunning, obviously, and epic in every single way. I'm truly speechless by what James Cameron has crafted, and as a huge Avatar fan, this film lived up to the hype. I cannot wait to see this movie again. We're having another screening literally the day before I'm posting this review, and I went and saw it again, so this is actually my second time watching it. I already have tickets to see it opening weekend with my fiance and her mother, who her mother is a big fan of Avatar, and I already texted a bunch of my friends and I said, I'm seeing this movie at least once a week until it leaves theaters, because it is a once-in-a-lifetime experience to see in the theaters. And again, we won't get another experience like this probably until Avatar 3. This just goes as far as say Cameron knows how to craft blockbusters, and epic ones at that. So with all that said, I'm going to give Avatar: The Way of the Water an A+. Thank you once again, guys, for watching this. Again, look forward to those other reviews. If you want a spoiler review for this movie, let me know down below. Maybe I'll do a live stream on that. But of course, until next time, stay classy.